Hello, and today's lesson for graphic storytelling in comic books, which is to say how to convey the story in the form of comic books, we're going to talk about camera shots. That's a term you might hear a lot or see in books talking about cinematography and telling stories in comic books. To first talk about the phrase camera shots, why do we use the term camera when we're probably not using cameras in drawing our comic books? We're using pens and pencils, not cameras. Partly because when comic books were first being created, somebody was saying, well, how do we determine what angle and how to view this and how to see that? And someone said, well, we have an entire vocabulary already in the movie industry. Let's just use theirs. So they started using the idea of camera shots. Now, why do we use the word shot? Because originally cameras were very large and cumbersome. They weren't something you could slip into your pocket like nowadays. And they aimed them like a gun. So they said, take the shot. When you're going to shoot a picture, you shoot the picture as if you were aiming a large weapon. It was actually a large, cumbersome device, sometimes even on tripods. So the phrase camera shot seems a little misleading perhaps at first. But with that in mind, the terminology that we use a lot of times in this category of telling the story, camera shots, comes directly from movies, the original movies back in the 30s. So this is why there seems to be some overlap. So there's two kinds of camera shots, or two categories of camera shots, I should say. The first one deals with range, which is the distance from the camera to the subject. Also, going back real quickly to the idea of camera shots, we're really not using cameras, as I said, unless you consider perhaps the image in your mind. You picture something in your mind, and then you use your pencil and pen to translate that down onto the page, onto that image you're trying to create from your mind into the comic book, into the story. So I guess to some extent, your mind's eye, to use a Shakespearean term, could be a camera of sorts. So going back to the two types, the first one is camera range, which is how far away the subject is from the camera, and camera angle. So let's talk about camera range first. So the first one we'll talk about is a long shot or a far shot, sometimes called an establishing shot, and it's kind of what you probably think it is. It's where the camera is further back. So if I start drawing a panel and I want to have people further away and buildings and cars and the street and the mountains and the trees, I don't want to get too close because I want to be able to show where it is. I'm establishing where it is. So if I went on vacation to the Grand Canyon and came back and I said, hey, I just got back from the Grand Canyon. I have some, I have some pictures. Would you like to see them? And they goes, oh yeah, we want to see your vacation. And they're all close-ups of my face. People are going to go, well, I can't tell you're on vacation. You could have done that here. When you think of the Grand Canyon, you want to see wide, long, far away, panoramic shots of the Grand Canyon. And they go, see this picture of the Grand Canyon, that little dot there? That's me. So that's a far shot, a long shot. A lot of times it's used for establishing when you're going to show where something is or when things are in relationship to each other. It's easier to do that. From further away. Moving on to medium shot, also known as a crop shot, and it's kind of just that. If you have a figure you see most of them, but not all of them. So a crop shot, meaning that part of them is cut off, the bottom of the feet, the bottom of the legs, but you see the majority of the figure, of the character, that would be considered a medium shot. The significance of having a medium shot is to show the character performing some action. They're holding something, putting something together, opening something. They're doing something. They're having some sort of physical activity, or they're having a physical reaction. They're reacting to something going on. They're performing something, or they're reacting in something that happened. So you want to show a physical reaction with their body. They're arching their back. They're tightening up. They're doing something. So that's a medium shot, or also known as a crop shot. And the third one is a close-up, which is what you think it is, getting in close, getting in, pushing in with the camera, so to speak, and getting right up on the subject, on the character. That's a lot of times used for showing emotional reactions. If you want to show someone's emotional reaction, it's easier if you're closer. We respond, we react to other people's emotions when we're closer to them. When we can express it, when they express it with their face and we can see that, we can take that in. If you saw a person way down there, down the street, and you stop and you go, is that person sad? Are they acting sad? I can't tell. They're too far away. But if they were right up on you and really upset and sad, you'd be like, yeah, that guy was upset. He was very sad. I get it. So those are the three ranges: far, medium, close. And they have different purposes in the story, presumably. Try to avoid, pardon me, try to avoid close-ups, extreme close-ups, especially of like the eye. You used to see that in comic books in the 90s and stuff where they'd really just show almost one eye. Unless there's a purpose of it, a distinct purpose of showing just the eye, try not to get that in. It's a bit cliched. It doesn't really read as well. I think it's a bit of a gimmick. So try to avoid the extreme close-up unless there's a purpose for it. It tends to sort of, slow down the story, so to speak. Now, moving on to our onto our second type or category of camera shots, and that has to do with angle, camera angle. And you're going to have three different kinds of camera angles. You're going to have the first one, it could be in any order, but the first one is a bird's eye view. So think of a camera looking down on a scene as opposed to being at eye level to begin with. So it's called bird's eye view because if a bird were to fly over and look down, what would it see? It would see from above. So this is taking your mind's eye and looking down into the scene. A lot of times the significance or the usage of this is to show a character in relationship to his background or to show a multitude of characters. If you had a parking lot and you tried to show a whole bunch of characters running around doing something, and if you had your camera, so to speak, set up at eye level at the edge of it, you would only see some of the characters because things would be in front of them. You'd see the ones in front, maybe a little bit of the ones behind it, but the ones behind that you wouldn't be able to tell. But if you brought your point of view up higher, you'd be able to see everything. This is usually why security cameras are up higher, because they can see more without things obstructing the view, and those things in relationship to each other and the environment around them. So the opposite of a bird's eye view is a worm's eye view, which is to say looking up, which is also called a hero shot sometimes. So taking the camera and tilting it upward. This will work. If this were my camera, so to speak, and here's the lens, this would be a bird's eye view pointed down. A worm's eye view would tilt it back up, looking upward. So it's called a hero shot on occasion, and it's done that way because you sometimes want to show the character as being more impressive, especially in comic books. You think of superheroes as not just being heroes, but in fact superheroes. They're not just there to protect you, but you can, always count on them and literally look up to them. So you can also use this for villains if you try to make a character more intimidating. More overbearing. Which is scarier? A grizzly bear who's the same height as you, or a grizzly bear who towers over you? You're going to be like, oh no, that grizzly bear is going to chew me up. So the worm's eye view, a lot of times, unless there's also something going on near the ground that you want to show an upward angle, like showing helicopters or birds or airplanes or tops of buildings from the point of view of the ground. A lot of times when you're just having medium shots, but you tilt the camera up and down in a worm's eye view, that's usually for showing some characterization, some overpowering feature of the character, whether it be for good or bad, heroes or villains.
Then the third one is actually called tilt, and also sometimes called a Dutch angle. So using this idea again, if this is the lens of my camera, I can tilt up, I can tilt down, but then when I turn it like this, that's tilt. So you'll see that occasionally in TV and movies, not as much. But in comic books, a lot of times when you see it, it's meant to imply a sense of movement, of rushed movement, or of an unnaturalness to the scene. If I had taken for example, an ant farm, and I was a mean guy, and I tilted the ant farm, and all the ants and all the sand had kind of pulled down to one side because of gravity. Or, just like I say, kind of an unnaturalness to the scene. If a person got hit in the head with a frying pan and they're kind of like, oh, I don't get it, I'm dizzy. That would be sort of a example of that out of touch sense that things are unusual or unnatural in the scene, something's wrong. Um, the other type of scenes, or shots I should say, and this actually has more to do with the series or in series of the scenes of the panels, can be either a passive or an observatory or an interactive series of panels. And sometimes you'll pick the range and or the angle, but the range a lot of times, to show the difference between the two. So a passive, or a one where a person is observing, is the point of view kind of is static. It stays here and the action kind of moves around it or goes by it. Or back and forth or up and down or away from it, as opposed to being interactive, which is to say the point of view changes and it moves, continuing the action or furthering the action into part of the story. So sometimes you want to give a sense of movement. It's better to have a point of view, not always, there's exceptions to every rule, but you want to have a point of view that's static and show that movement as things go by, as things go flying by. If you want to sometimes show that the character is active, give it their point of view and have them moving and what are they reacting to, what are they seeing, what's going on around them, then it seems much more that the viewer is part of the action. And there's good points for both. There's reasons for both, the significance for both. And I'll be putting in some graphics and illustrations into this. Again, this is the second video. I hope everybody enjoyed it. I hope it's informative. If you have questions, feel free to message me. If you want something specific to be talked about, like a certain type of storytelling or element of storytelling in comic books or otherwise, feel free to message that to me and I will try to address that in a future video. Hope these are helpful. Hope people are having fun. Hope people are staying safe. And I'll see everybody soon.